Hey everyone, in today's video, I want to tell you about some Social Security reform that has a really good chance of becoming law. Now, this reform is not some minor adjustment to an obscure clause in the regulations. I'm talking about nearly everything changing. And in this video, I'll break down the big changes that's likely to affect you. But before we get into this, just know that this is a bill that I'll be watching very carefully. And as it moves closer to actual law, there's likely going to be some changes, and when I see those changes, I plan to let my subscribers know about it quickly. So if you don't want to miss it, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notifications bell. This is the Social Security 2100 Act. Congressman John Larson has reintroduced this bill just about every year for the last 7 or 8 years, but this year is different. Representative Larson is a Democrat and is the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee subcommittee on Social Security. When this bill was first introduced, it died a very quick death because the Republicans controlled the House. But now it's back, and it already has enough co-sponsors to pass it through the House, or nearly enough co-sponsors. And this time, the Democrats are in control of the House and the Senate, and President Biden's support is a foregone conclusion. So let me tell you, this is one you need to watch. We've covered this bill before, but now it's had some changes with the goal of gaining the support of the Republicans. So if you've already watched my video from a couple of years ago where I interviewed Congressman Larson, or the video where I broke down the then current Social Security 2100 Act, you still need to watch this because there are some key differences. The goal of this bill doesn't seem to be fixing Social Security permanently, although you may not hear about this in the sound bites and the news reports. Of the 14 things that are changing in this bill, 12 of those will sunset in 2027. Now, I get what they're trying to do with this. Sometimes if you can't get enough support for a full change, you can get enough support to vote yes, as long as there's an expiration date on the changes. Now, this is what happened on the Trump tax cuts and lots of other legislation over the years. But this really sets the scene for a disaster because not only does it make it incredibly hard to plan your retirement because it'd be hard to know what to expect when the provisions were scheduled to sunset in 2027. But also, many of these provisions would require the Social Security Administration to recalculate benefits for payments starting in 2027. And I can't see how that would be anything other than a massive disaster. But hopefully, there'll be some compromise where the provisions that stay and are eventually passed into law are actually permanent and none of this sunsetting business. Now, this proposal as it's written now will include a fairly broad set of changes, but for today, I want to cover these changes from a high level, so just understand this. This video is not a deep dive into each of these topic areas. It's likely to change as the process moves forward, and we'll save the deep dives for the videos when and if we ever get a signature-ready bill. Now, not all of these changes are going to affect everyone. There are some changes that are specific to public servants, changes specific to disability benefits, changes to how benefits are paid to survivors, and a few other nuanced changes that only affect specific groups. But there are also some broad changes that most everyone will feel. Here's the changes that we're going to be covering today. First, the prevention of reductions to the average wage index, then giving earning credits to caregivers, eliminating the disability waiting period, eliminating the disability earnings cliff, increasing the minimum Social Security benefit, the introduction of an alternative survivor benefit calculation, an increase for individuals after 15 years on Social Security, the repeal of the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, increasing the age for children's benefits to age 26, adding benefits for dependent grandchildren, increase of the taxable wage base, changes to the taxation of Social Security benefits, change to the annual cost of living calculation, and finally, an across-the-board benefit increase. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about how this bill will affect the longevity of the Social Security Trust Fund. So let's dive into each of these changes. First up is a provision that will prevent future reductions to the average wage index. This index is based on the average wages of Americans, and it controls a lot of pieces of the Social Security system, including the annual formula by which benefits are calculated. You may recall there being some fear that the 2020 average wage index could result in a decrease to the benefit formula for those turning 62 in 2022. Now, this change will prevent the average wage index from being reduced if we get into a period where wages fall. And this ensures that the formula will not produce a lower benefit because of wage changes. And really, it lines up with most of the other Social Security provisions which prohibit an annual decrease. Now, this is one of the provisions that would not sunset. It would be permanent. So that's a good thing. In addition to preventing future reductions to the average wage index, this bill would also have some built-in increases that would be added on top of the normally computed level. For years 2022 through 2027, this increase would be the normally calculated average wage index plus 1.4%. For years 2028 through 2031, it would add an additional 1.5%. These increases would continue to add to the normally calculated level in an increasing amount until 2050, where the increase would be an additional 2.2% on top of the normal calculation. Now, frankly, I just don't see this provision staying in because the result of this is increased benefits, and that's just going to increase the strain on the system. Next is an earnings credit for caregivers. This proposal has been around for a while, and it's meant to provide retirement compensation in the form of Social Security credits to individuals who left the workforce to care for their loved ones. So if someone is caring for a child under the age of 12 or a relative who is chronically dependent, they can receive up to 5 years of credit towards a future Social Security benefit. Now, this part of the bill would expire at the end of 2026. And then up next is the elimination of the disability waiting period. Under current law, disabled workers and disabled widowers must be disabled for 5 months after their disability onset date before they can start receiving Social Security disability benefits. Now, under the new law, this waiting period would be eliminated and Social Security monthly benefits would become available beginning with the first full month after the onset of disability. And this change would be effective for those who became entitled to disability benefits between 2022 through the end of 2026. Another disability provision is the elimination of the disability earnings cliff. The way this disability earnings cliff currently works is that when individuals receiving disability benefits go over a certain amount of earnings for a certain period of time, they go into what's called an extended period of eligibility. During this 36-month period, if monthly earnings are over the substantial gainful activity threshold, even by $1, benefits are withheld for that month. And once that 36-month period is over, if earnings go over the threshold, again, even by $1, the disability benefit is completely terminated. Now, this new law would remove that cliff and would simply reduce the disability payment by $1 for every $2 over the limit, much the same way as the early Social Security benefits are reduced with the earnings limit. Now, this provision would also sunset at the end of 2026. One interesting note here is that the substantial gainful activity level they would be using would be the level for blind individuals, which is substantially higher than the normal threshold. And up next is the increase to the minimum Social Security benefit. Now, there's not much said about the Social Security minimum benefit, but this is the lowest amount an individual can receive who worked a certain number of years. Now, it's meant to offer a floor for those who had very low-paying jobs. In 2021, the minimum is $897 for those who worked for 30 years. Now, the new minimum benefit will be 125% of the poverty level for those who worked for 30 years. This would represent an increase of about $440 per month. And this also would sunset at the end of 2026. And then we have the introduction of an alternate survivor benefit calculation. Now, this new calculation would essentially create a combined benefit from the benefit of the deceased and the benefit of the surviving spouse. It would be calculated by adding together 75% of the surviving spouse's own benefit from their work and 75% of the benefit of the deceased spouse or the spouse they would have received if they were still alive. For example, let's look at a hypothetical couple under the current rules and then the same couple under the new proposed rule. So let's assume that the husband has a benefit of $1,500 and the wife has a benefit of $1,000. This gives them a current household benefit of $2,500. So if the husband dies, the wife would start receiving his benefit and her benefit would drop off. This means that her income from Social Security would decline by $1,000 per month. That's a 40% cut. Now, under the new rules, the survivor benefit would be calculated by taking 75% of the deceased husband's benefit, so $1,125, plus 75% of the spouse's benefit who is still alive. So that's $750 from her benefit, and if you add these together, you get $1,875 as the new survivor benefit amount. So that's actually a 25% increase from what she would have gotten under the current rules. Now, under this version of the law, there's going to be some limitations in place, so there's certainly more that needs to be discussed here. So don't just take that and run your retirement plan calculations on that alone if this law is passed. The next proposal is to increase benefits for individuals after 15 years of receiving Social Security. Beginning in the 16th year of entitlement to Social Security, individuals would receive a 1% increase to their primary insurance amount. This would continue to the 20th year, resulting in a total increase of 5%. Any spousal or children's benefit paid from someone receiving these increases would also increase. And then we have the repeal of the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset. Currently, these are two provisions that affect those with a pension from an employer where they did not pay Social Security taxes. The windfall elimination provision impacts benefits from an individual's own work history, and the government pension offset impacts individuals who would normally be entitled to spousal or survivor benefits. Now, this change would be to temporarily cease applying these provisions to individuals between 2022 and the end of 2026. And at that point, these benefits would again be reduced with the old law penalties. Now, this one could get interesting and create a rush for filing for benefits among public servants because they have a 5-year window of time where they'd be able to receive a penalty-free benefit. And then we have two proposals that are centered around children. The first is to increase the eligibility age for children's benefits to age 26. Under current law, benefits are available to children of retired, disabled, and deceased workers who are full-time students at a secondary school or elementary school up to attainment of age 19. Now, this provision would extend eligibility of student benefits to full-time and part-time students, including post-secondary students, so after high school, up to attainment of age 26. Now, that's, again, for those with entitlement between 2022 and 2026, because in 2027, this would expire. The second proposal for children is adding benefits for dependent grandchildren. Now, currently, grandchildren can receive benefits from a grandparent who is also receiving benefits, but the criteria is pretty strict. Generally, both parents have to be disabled or deceased, or the grandparents must formally adopt the grandchild. Now, the new law would provide benefits to children who are in the custody of a grandparent or other eligible relative for at least 12 months and are receiving at least 1/2 of their financial support from the relative. Now, this is going to be effective for children between 2022 and 2026. After that, it sunsets and it goes away. Another one of the changes that will be permanent is the increase of the taxable wage base. Currently, in 2021, you only pay Social Security taxes on the first $142,800 of earnings. For earnings over that, you do not pay the 12.4% tax. This new law would put a gap in how this is taxed. If an individual's income exceeded $400,000, the FICA tax would kick back in. Now, these excess wages, as this bill calls it, would not be applied to your benefit calculation at the same rate as they currently are. Instead, a new bracket would be added to credit your benefit by 1% of the excess. Up next is a change to the taxation of Social Security benefits. Now, this hasn't changed since 1993, so it's probably time for some change here. If we look at the way the system is set up now, there are currently 2 thresholds. Under the new law, there would only be 1. So let me show you how this works right now so the change will make more sense. When determining how much of your benefit is taxable, your combined income is calculated. Now, this is the number that the Social Security Administration uses to determine how much of your benefit is going to be included as taxable income. That combined income can be roughly calculated as your adjusted gross income plus any tax-exempt interest, like interest from tax-free bonds, plus 50% of your Social Security benefits. Once you determine the combined income, You simply run it through the threshold tables to make that determination about how much of it is going to be taxable. For a single person whose combined income is up to $25,000, none of their Social Security benefits will be taxable. But if the combined income is between $25,000 and $34,000, up to 50% of the benefit may be taxed. And if the combined income is more than $34,000, up to 85% of the benefits may be taxed. Now, if you file a joint return and have combined income that is less than the base amount of $32,000, none of your benefits are going to be taxable. If your total combined income is between $32,000 and $44,000, up to 50% of your benefit is taxable. And if your combined income is more than $44,000, up to 85% of the benefit may be taxable. Now, these are not cliff brackets where you go over by $1 and a benefit immediately becomes either 50% or 85% countable as taxable income. This system is a gradual phase-in of tax on Social Security benefits where, as income rises, more of the Social Security benefit is subject to taxation until eventually 85% of your benefits are taxable. The change that is being proposed is where this would be a single set of thresholds, $35,000 for single filers and $50,000 for joint filers. Any combined income over that amount is the amount of Social Security which would be taxable at 85%. And then we have the change to the annual cost of living calculation. Currently, the cost of living adjustment is calculated with the CPI-W. Now, this methodology has been criticized because they say it doesn't take into account a retiree's expenses that are simply not the same as an individual who is working. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has kept up with an experimental inflation number for the past several years called the CPI-E. And in this measurement, they use households over the age of 60. And when you look at a side-by-side comparison, it's easy to see where a retiree's expenses are different. Look at the green bars, which represent the expenses of individuals over the age of 62, and you'll quickly see that housing and medical care take up a lot more of a retiree's income. If those categories increase at a rate faster than inflation, the current method just doesn't keep up. Just know, this doesn't always increase at a faster rate, though. If this change would have been implemented in 2021, the CPI-E would have given an increase of 4.8% instead of the 5.9% increase that everyone received from the CPI-W. Now, this is where this one could get interesting. This is one of the provisions that will sunset at the end of 2026. And it says they're going to revert to current law benefit levels for January 2028 and later. So that's the one announced in October of 2027. So let's imagine that the CPI-E had averaged 0.2% higher for 5 years. That would be an average of 1% over the current law CPI-W. When this provision would sunset, all the benefits then would be recalculated based on the old law, the CPI-W, which would result in a 1% across-the-board decrease to benefits. I don't think they're going to let that happen, but it'll be interesting to watch this one unfold. And the final change we're going to talk about is an across-the-board benefit increase. Now, the way they're going to accomplish this is by a slight change to the Social Security formula. Currently, your historical earnings are applied to a crediting formula at age 62 to determine your benefit amount. The only change they're going to make is that the top number in this formula will change from 90% to 93% credit to your benefit amount for the earnings in that range. So the estimate is that benefits will increase by an average of about $30. So the big question that remains is, will this actually help extend the life of the Social Security Trust Fund? Well, it would, but according to the actuaries at the Social Security Administration, it would only extend it by 4 years. So that hardly sounds worth going through all of this trouble, but the thought is this is the opening round in Social Security reform. With an expiration date on most of these changes, this is likely going to come up for discussion again. And when it does, I'll be covering it here. So if you haven't subscribed yet, you need to. Thank you for watching.